This daf Yerushalmi Pesachim. In the article is the Darish where daf Samachet Mav New Perek, beginning the Mishnah, and that in the Vilna is on Nun Zayin Amud Beis. Ha'isha bezmanchi bebeis a woman when she's in her husband's house. Shochet le'bala, her husband shechs upon her. Tocha mishabala, sheets from her husband, and the Korban Eda says Hachi Garcina. They both shechted upon her. Talking Michelle Bala, she eats her husband's. Cause Michelle Pirsha, she's Michelle Avia, talking Michelle Bala. The stomach daita limonos Bala. So we assume since she's a base Bala, mistama her das was to eat from her husband's, and she eats from her husband's korban. But if she went to as the Mishnah says next, if she went to her father's house for the first yotif after she got married, which was customary, then Bala told him she wrote, so we don't say there's a stam das. She can choose whichever one she's going to eat from. It shows those in qualifications here, but not important for us right now. Yosem, similarly, Yosem Shechtel Apotropim, who has two guardians, and they both shechted for him. Yochim Bakum Shirot, so he can choose which one. Ever Shoshnei Shutfim, ever of two partners, Lo Yacham Mishoshnei, we can't eat from either one of them, because each one impedes upon the other. Moshe says it's only if they're makbid on each other. If they're not makbid on each other, then also he has the same halacha, he can eat from either one. But it's assuming that the masters don't want their part of the Eved to be subscribed on the other master's korban. So the Chetzil Eved, Chetzil Shem Ben Chorin, if a person's half slave, half free, so then Lo Yacham Misharabah should not eat from his master's korban. The korban says, because we say Mistoma, Lo Yadas Rabbalim No Schel. We assume that the master did not have in mind that the free part of the Eved should be subscribed to. Says Gemara, 4 people mechusei kapara, and they are not allowed to come to the Beis Hamikdash themselves and eat kachim until their karbanos are brought. They're not allowed. You could set aside the karbanos to them without their awareness. As Korban says, we are Reuven Chayav Karban Yochel Shimon Lafrisha Lakriva Avuro. Shimon can set aside and to bring it for him. Shalom Bidaita without his awareness. These are they. Hazav, Zava, Yoledas Mitzora. Man who had the Ziva condition, a woman that has Ziva condition, a woman who gave birth, and a person that's a Ras. And the Shekain, so the Gemara says, Shekain Adam Ravish Abno Koton Vunosen by Eresa. Because a person can set aside a korban on his child who needs to have a korban brought because he was in one of these conditions, even though he's in a cradle. Korban Eda says, "Shkein other mavishal no cousin shtem azos Torres hazav." This is the procedure for a zav. Ben gadol ben katan, whether he's an adult or a minor. Chem kul ksiv Torah. Well, them it says Torah. So the procedure. Chayech adam maybe al beno katan shin lo das. So a person could bring for his child who has to undergo this procedure, even though he has no das. So too he can do it for his friend who's an adult who's unaware. So it's no different than doing it for his child. So it says, zav v'zava u'mitzayra. Okay, all of those I understand. Violetas, but by Yoletas it doesn't work out. V'yesh k'tana Yoletas. In other words, each one I can learn from the katan in their parsha that's migo. They can be say the katan you can be chaver shlomidaito, but by Yoletas there's no katana. The katana is not Yoletas, so therefore how can you possibly say I learned from the katana of Yoletas that I can also set aside for the Gedolah Shlomidaita? Lochem Rabbi Difa, Rabbi Yonah, B'Shem Rabbi Yehuna, didn't they say, Chuna, the Ibra V'Yolda, Shlovi Shtei Staros, if a woman became pregnant and gave birth before she had two hairs on her while she was still a minor, Hiu B'Nah Mesim, she and her children die, so therefore how is there a Yoletas Tana? Right? So Mishavir Shtei Staros, only once but she has two hairs, then Hiu B'Nah Chaim, then her child survives. Mishavia Shtei Saras I'm sorry, in the Chaim, Ivra Shalo Hivia Shtei Saros V'Yolda Mishavia Shtei Saros. And don't, you can't say so about where she became pregnant before she had 2 hairs and then she gave birth after she brought 2 hairs. He Chayav B'Nab Mason. In that case, she survives, but her child dies. Now, that's not relevant to us, because that would be a good case by us, because that she would have to be a korban because she survived, even though her child died. But the point is that we have no frame of reference where she's a ktana and she gave birth and she survives, and that she should bring a korban, right? That we can learn from there that you can also bring a korban on adult Yoledes Shlomi. So, Micah doing what's a case which we can, by Yoledes itself, we have a similar case where of Shlomi Daita. Shkin Adam Marvish Abito Ktana. Now, a lot of Forshim, including Gilin Ephraim, and the article changes to Chereshes, but we're going to stick with the case in front of us, because that's what it says, and it works out. He can set aside the korban while she's still a child, even though she'll bring it later on when she's an adult. But he sets aside while she's still a child, and okay, later on she'll bring it. Says, well, that's no good. Mikavan here, everywhere it changes. Whether they change Chereshes or not, the change it to Mikavan Shevia says, well, yeah, but she only giving birth according to what we just established. Even if she was misaberes when she's ktana, she's only giving birth after she's a gedolim. Mishivia sheistara. So it's not became mishisia. Mishivia. So mishivia look for yotzis mishusavia. She was yotze from the rishus of her father. So therefore, it's not shlomi daita. It obviously is with her das, because by the time the korban is being brought, she has das. So where do we see that there's a case of shlomi daita? Other mavishal ishto chereshes. You marriage korban for your wife, who's the Yoledes, who's the Chereshes. So herself can't be mafish because she has no das. She has to have it anyway, because those Torahs are Yoledes. She has there's a procedure that must be done. So must be her husband's mafish lomidaita. So therefore, mafish lomidaita. So therefore, because she has no das, you go to mafish or regular Yoledes also shlomidaita. Okay. V'kan soita ktana einad yochel. So the korban Ada says, Klomar, meaning, gam korban soita badi kapora. Why is it mentioned korban soita, which also seems to be a similar scenario, even though it's not technically mechutz kapora. Because you can't find a case of soita ktana who's going to drink, because the whole soita is to find whether it's oinus or rotzon. The Rabbi Zira, Rabbi Yosef, B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan, ktana shtazin, so ain't the rotzon, the also abala. She doesn't have rotzon, she becomes her husband. She also to her husband as a kohen, because she's also even bonus for her husband, but there's no checking, there's no check for a soita, for a ktana. Also, chereshes ain't yochel. There's no such as chereshes either. The chsiv, and evidently even that's true, even if she's just mute, not a deaf mute. The chsiv amra isha amen amen. She has to be able to respond, and a mute woman cannot respond and say amen amen to the shvuos of the soita. So along comes Rabbi Ahmed now in Ari's Rabbi Yochanan says you can't just be marvish on any random chusay kapar shlomi daito, only on your wife. Rabbi Avin Shani he deceive and Sivan and his wife, even she's a gdoila, deceive samachta tovesecha. It says you're samach, you and your household, which always means your wife. It says came shimukov al yedei kach milismach ima, since he has impeded if the sometimes basically make the from having simcha if his wife doesn't have simcha as well, and her simcha is also korbanos. So therefore it says, and it also says samachta ve'tovesecha. So therefore he can bring the korban for her. Korbanahu. A person cannot separate any other korban for chutz midaito for an adult, except for his own wife. And next time we have a significant discrepancy in the pshat between the korban Ada and Pnei Moshe. Rabbi Yerushalmi said, a person could set on its own a korban nazir shlomi daito without his consent, without his intent, awareness. But he can't separate elami daito. So the way the korban Ada learns, if the person, the nazir, set aside the korban daito, mutakiva shalomi daito, then another person can bring it, the designated korban, without the awareness of the nazir. I mean, but you can't set it aside. Somebody doesn't want to be miskaper somebody else's korban. You can't. So once it's set aside, you can bring shlomi daito. But you can't actually set aside shlomi daito. So the Bnei Moshe says very differently. He says korban nazir ligbola korban to designate an animal. She would say that if he wants, he can bring it as a korban. But he can't formally make it a korban. But it says pratus. Shlomi daito. The kol tzrichim das chusim chesoi kapara the kol shlo except for the chesoi kapara which you mentioned before. So this is he can designate it, but he can't actually make it kodesh. Now, whichever you learn goes to the next two cases too. Rabbi Zira b'shem Rabbi Yehuda said, "Other kover chaveru kol chatas chelev shlomi daito." Person can kover for spending chatas chelev. But only it'll be mafresh midaito. Again, according to Korbaneda, he can bring it once it's separated, but not actually separate it. According to Moshe, he can designate it, but not actually be makdish it until the person makdish himself. And Rabbi Zir Shem said, "Adam shochet piso shchaver shlomi daito." He can shecht. Here we have the different language already. He can shecht the peso of his chaver shlomi daito. But he can't be mafresh except midaito. So the question is when, according to Korbaneda, of course, you're shochet and kover are the same thing, right? The asiya. According to the Bnei Moshe here raised like a different case. That once it's separated, then he can shecht it, and Bnei Moshe will say, well, look, it's a different language, so therefore it's different meaning, not like the previous two cases. Okay, the next Gemara is a Gemara which has a lot of difficulties in the Girsa, and everybody changes the Girsa one way or another. So we are actually going to go with the Mashbiach's Girsa here. And therefore I'm going to actually show you the Mashbiach's Girsa. Okay, I think even though to me it looks backwards, to you it looks the right way. When you look at it on screen, I'm pretty sure about that. So let's enlarge it a bit. And the Girsa we're going to go with, again, is the Girsa of the Mashbiach in the Sugya. I'll make sure you can see it. Amar Rabbi Lezer. Lezer said, Masnisa lo amra kain. Our Mishnah does not say this. It doesn't agree with this. Because it says, Isha bizman sheviriba beis bala, a woman when she's in her husband's house, shachat alea, afilu shachat alea bala, tocha misha bala. I think I read that correctly. Let me just check. Yes, that's correct. That was the Girsa of the Karmei we said in the Mishnah. Let's say it again. Our Mishnah does not say this. It says, Aisha, the Mishnah says, Aisha Bisman. Aisha Bisman, she bebeis Bala, a woman, she's her husband's house, Bala, and they both share about her, Tocha Misha Bala. She eats from her husband's korban, right? Mana Kayamin. What are we talking about? Ibn Machin Pshita. If she did, she protested. In other words, she said which one she's going to eat from. That's obvious that she eats from the one she designated, which her husband's korban. But Einam Machin, but what's he talking about? That where she did not designate it, right? To say which one. So they shouldn't tell. We'll say which one she's going to eat from. Masnisa ela be'ena machin, right? So masnisa be'ena machin. So it seems that there's a she didn't say anything, and yet nevertheless you can set aside the korban without her knowledge, right? So as we had just said, that Ein Official Midaito doesn't see that way from our Mishnah. It seems that you can set aside the korban, even though she didn't designate the korban, be makdish the korban, even though she didn't authorize it, right? So far so good, I hope. Yeah, so I just checked, so to make sure we're all in the same place. So Stam Isha, when the third line down now in the Mashbiach's Girsa, Stam isha memacha lomar etz bali ani rotza. No, this by default a woman wants to do it by her husband. So therefore, it's in kind of an anansadeh that she sure would want her husband, and therefore it's not considered to be marfish shalomi daita. Okay, now so question fine. Amana ma. What's the status of amana? Her children checked upon her a carbon, and at the time when she's continued to be to get mazonos minichse bala, right? So what's the status by amana? So what's the case? Rabbi Yossi Barbun, Rabbi Yossi Barbun, she has children, and the question is what her status is now that there's children shechted upon her. Do I say that her stam that she can rely on her children's as siyah, even though she didn't actually, she wasn't actually megala das, that she wants to have biyoti with her children. So Rabbi Yossi Rabbeinu, listen to Patvish Jabban Mistam Isha Memacha Lomar Eitz B'nei Rotza. Yeah, by default, a woman is assumed to want to do it with her children. Okay, so therefore, the same. Therefore, if the children shech, it's not to be mafish or something like that because I don't say that's a shem's or das. Of course, we don't know if she has several children, what she's going to do, but by default, we assume she's going to go by children, even though she still needs zaynis. The base via. Based bala, nevertheless, we assume that she's going to want to be with the children on the korban. Okay. Right, so that's called for a mishnah. If she went the first yontif to go in her father's house, she eats from wherever she wants, either from her husband or from her father. Rabbi Yerushalmi Pesachim said, "Masnisin be'eino memacha." The Mishnah is talking about where she didn't designate. Now we're going to ask a question for Rabbi Yochanan, because this Rabbi Yirmiyah says that. I'm going to go back to the text I made. So this Rabbi Yochanan said that. Actually, Rabbi Yochanan before had said by Chatas Chelev that you're going to be Marish Midaito, but our Mishnah by Pesach. It's a Shlomi Daito, because clearly Shlomi Daito, because it could be either one of them. There's no Stam Das when it's first Yontif after she got married. So which one is it? Can you separate Shlomi Das or not separate Shlomi Das? Now let's go back to Mashbiach. We're in the sixth line down in the Mashbiach. Beis Hadah. Says the Mashbiach, says the Gemara, Beis Mashbiach. Beis Hadah Pliga Rabbi Zira Shvei Rabbi Yechanan. There's not this shot in the Mishnah called Rabbi Yirmiyah, that not arguing Rabbi Zira said name Rabbi Yechanan, the other Kobeh Chat the slave Shlomi Daito in my official Midaito, that the person you can't set aside except Midaito in our Mishnah, it's Marvish Shlomi Daito, right? Why the difference between the two? So it's not been using machin in the sense of choosing. Now we use machin more its classic sense of repudiating. Shani Pesach. Pesach different Shani Chatos. Pesach different than a Chatos. Pesach, the Kshetimoche royally skaper. Pesach, when if she protests and she doesn't want to be part of the Korban Pesach, so there are other people there, right? The father or husband, and the Korban is still going to be kosher. So therefore they can be mafish shlomi daita, and then she can choose, and to choose one way, not the other way. So therefore that's not a problem because there are other people menuyim on the korban, right? But chatas l'shetimacha in a roy l'skaper. If she repudiates it, it's not roy l'skaper because they can't use chatas for anybody else. There's no such concept of multiple menuyim on a chatas. So therefore, by chatas, it doesn't work shlomi daita. So Pesach is fungible, as we say. That's why it works by Pesach, and you can be mafish shlomi daita because anyway it can go back and forth. Whereas by Pechatas, since there's no back and forth, either works or doesn't. So therefore, you can't be mafish shlomi daita. Okay. Okay, then so it continues, but and the Mashbiach, as you saw, continue also. But we're at a place where we already can use the text of the Gemara itself without getting confused, and also it's already on top of Amud Aleph. So we'll stop here for the day and pick up with this next Gemara next time we meet. But obviously, the significant changes from the Gemara itself in the Mashbiach, there's an executive decision to go with the Mashbiach as the one which is the most Klash Mahalach, and obviously the many other alternatives. Ma'ayin, Yun Rav, Yivchar. Okay, that'll be that for today.